Happy Devil's Wednesday. This is the State of the Fan Address Road Trip Edition. I'm your host, Sam Wu, here with Pucks and Pitchforks blog editor-in-chief Nick Filano on the road somewhere in some undisclosed bunker location in the United States of America. Streaming live on Facebook Live, Twitter Live, YouTube Live, and Twitch on the Primetime Radio Network. Nick, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. How do I sound? How do I look? Everything. How are we doing?
Everything looks great. Now that I jinxed it, I hope we survive this podcast.
Listen, we're gonna go. We're gonna go as we can go, and you know, the Let's Go Devils podcast. We are consistent. We always come to you. We make sure that we have everything you need. But at the same time, you know, our fans know that since we are, we're working with all kinds of circumstances, they understand that we will give them what we give them. But Sam, there's the Devils haven't exactly been in a lot of rumors and a lot of information and stuff like that, but we can very absolutely see them being tied to some of these big name players that have been talked about.
Really?
I mean,
well,
listen,
actually, I kind of know because I've been following Pucks and Pitchforks blog, pucksandpitchforks.com lately, and I bet you traffic's up because you and the team have put out some pretty good articles.
Yeah, I mean we've had quite the month. Couple bangers out there, and because you know, like I said, there hasn't been a lot of Devil centric news. The only thing is, you know, got to send out a rest in peace to Tom Curvers,
Yes.
and kind of had a fun little walk down memory lane with him. Looked at his, you know, I know everybody's going to talk about his tie to the Scott Niedermayer trade, and obviously, you know, that was huge for the Devils franchise, but he had a big impact on the team itself. And that 1988 run, I mean, he had I think he had like 15 points in that run. So that run might not happen if it's not for Tom Curvers. Tom Curvers was phenomenal. And then the next season, I think he had 66 points. Had a really good Devils career. And Toronto made a desperation play thinking he was going to be the piece that helped them, you know, far down the line. And you know, something happened and his production fell off and the Devils traded him. And, you know, the rest is history. But, you know, well, cancer's a cruel beast. And
It is.
you know, I just wanted to say that because that was one of the articles that I was like, you know, let me look. Because I was actually talking to my father-in-law, funnily enough. I was like, I'm trying to figure out how to talk about this because I feel like I have to. Tom Curvers is a very famous part of Devils history because of the trade, but you don't want to be like the guy who got traded passed away, especially when he's such a liked guy around the league and such a you know, everybody talks about how humble he was, how important he was. He was the assistant GM to the Minnesota Wild, a place where he won the Hobie Baker Award with the Minnesota. It was Minnesota Duluth, and so he had quite the career. He definitely made a big impact on the ice. So I just wanted to say that before getting started in kind of the free agency and trade stuff.
Yeah, and again, he's most known amongst Devils fans for that trade, but to me, he was one of the, you know, the one of the pieces early on because that run, and even Bruce Driver, former Devils captain and good friend of the podcast, also took to Twitter, sending his condolences. But I mean, him and Randy Velishek, guys that you don't hear too often they're kind of like the original start of that Devils, run, when Lou Lamoriello came. So definitely fond memories. But yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, because you just talked about some of the articles that we've been writing. We have been writing a ton of trade stuff, a ton of free agency stuff, a ton of expansion draft stuff. The expansion draft stuff. Actually, Friday there should be a lot of expansion. So Vinny wrote something on the expansion draft 2 days ago. On Friday, I'm going to put 4 or 5 pieces on the expansion draft that will be up on pucksandpitchforks.com. So there's a lot coming. But I just wanted to point out that piece because it's just, like you said, we all talk about that trade when it comes to Tom Curvers. But when you talk about his impact on those early Devils teams, it can't be understated. He was there for 2 seasons and I think a game, something like that. But we've seen before, players have huge impacts on teams, especially in those 80s. The 80s, like, pieces were moving so much, but they'd come and they'd have this huge impact on the team, and then, they get moved to the next one. Curvers is one of those players, and he's stuck around the NHL for a reason. That's why he was the assistant GM in Minnesota, and maybe a guy to be a future GM. But so unfortunate news. But just to kind of move to the next thing, just to kind of bring a happier light, we do. I think that this offseason is going to be an exciting one. I think that the Devils are going to be in a lot more than people think. I know people are like joking about how the Devils don't spend any money and they're not going to do anything with their assets. They're not going to do anything with the cap space, and the cap space is a weapon. Unless you don't use it, then it's not a weapon. And we're going to hear everything in the book, and we're going to hear fans say what they're going to say. And I get it. I do, because we've been here before, and we've been one of the least impactful team in a lot of these off seasons. And I don't think, I look back on that 2018 off season where we did nothing. You remember that, Sam? And we were all hoping the Devils. I mean, they come off their first playoff berth since 2012, and there's pieces out there. James Van Riemsdyk is out there. Pat Maroon. We were trying to get Pat Maroon, but he was hoping that John Quenneville was going to fill a role, and he was hoping that these players that just weren't good or ready were going to fill a role. They just didn't. They were never built to fill. So, and then since then, the 2019 offseason, obviously, he went the other way. You got PK Subban, you got Nikita Gusev, you got Wayne Simmons, and he drafted Jack Hughes. So that was supposed to be, the summer of the Devils. We won the offseason. It was great. We were fighting with the Rangers fans because the Rangers got Trouba, and I think that was the year they got Panarin. So, we were always like, oh, who's better, Panarin or Hall? Who's better, Subban or Trouba? Who's better, Jack Hughes or Kapokaka? So it was just a fun offseason, and the season went to hell right from the get-go. Yep. So, and then last season it was a pandemic. They did some things. Like, I liked Corey Crawford. I liked the Andreas Janssen and the Ryan Murray trades. And, it just, Crawford retired. And then we got COVID. And it didn't work out again. So, I think the fans who have been patient are going to be rewarded. But don't come out here and say, like, the owners are cheap, because it doesn't have anything to do with it. They have to hit a salary cap. They could be, they're not one of these teams. Like, I remember Arizona for a long time was taking on LTIR contracts just to get to the salary cap floor on, like, this Marian Hossa contract that's $6 million on the salary cap, but pays them $1 million, things like that. We're not doing that. We're not taking those contracts on just to hit the floor, because I think we know that the salary cap's an asset, and we want to use that asset and use it intelligently. And, like, the teams that did that, even if they got assets in return, a lot of them haven't. It hasn't worked out for them. You know what I mean? No one really worked out for is the Lightning, who did it with Marian Gaborik, weirdly, but they knew that they could just throw him on LTIR and call it a day. It's a very strange situation that how teams are using salary cap space. But the Devils have, I think, like $37 million. Is that right? I'd have to double check.
It's a lot of money. Again, I've been very critical of the ownership group. I've been very critical at times. I like most of what Fitzgerald has done, but I will say this though: why spend money? Why throw money at the problem? How about build a core nucleus and then spend the money to go for that cup run? And having that $37 million, if they have with the existing team that they have now, young, every year that goes by, we would assume and expect Nico is going to get better, Jack Hughes is going to get better, Ty Smith will get better. Assuming we're hoping that none of these young kids regress, and suddenly they find themselves in the playoff mix. And you're armed with all that cap space. I mean, that's a feast or famine, and we haven't gotten to that point yet. So it is very frustrating. But I think the reward, if Fitzy plays his cards right, and the money is there when he wants to spend it, I think this could be an amazing run. The problem I have is the Harris Blitzer Sports Entertainment. I look at the Sixers and another disappointment in the playoffs. But at least they're in the playoffs. But the NBA is a little bit different.
Because I wrote about this too. Do you think the two coincide? Do you think the two correlate? The Devils and the Sixers?
I think it's apple and oranges. What I look at in terms of track record is that winning mindset and that winning culture. And I just think they're just more focused on the business end naturally. And I've always felt, if you're looking at what's happening on Long Island, yes, they're down 1-0 right now. I saw it on the Mike Rossi running down the Facebook Live. Some owners make their money by not even thinking about the books, the accounting. They make their money by building a brand of win now, win now, win now. If you look at history of sports, the New York Yankees, I hate to admit it, it was always win now, win now, win now. You look at I as much as I hate this franchise, I admire the late Ed Snyder, because every time the Flyers would get bounced out, he didn't care about the money. Of course he did, naturally, but he wanted to win at all costs. And I think a lot of us fans would like to see Joshua Harris get mad because the Devils lost. But that's just not his personality, and yeah. I respect that. But I think it's comparing apples and oranges, because the NBA, right now it's like, hey, who wants to team up in the playground and have the big three, maybe 4 or 5 later, play most of the minutes. Hockey is a true team sport. And you can't use your success in the NBA and have that translate success in hockey. Hockey doesn't work that way. And also with the fans, hockey fans hate fake PR releases. They want the real stuff. They don't want the spin. And I think it's a big difference there.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that, because I remember a story that sticks out in my mind for a long time. that has to do with the Sixers. I remember the day the Sixers traded away Michael Carter Williams, and he was the former Rookie of the Year. He was somebody who looked like he had a really good career ahead of him. And I was listening to 97.5 The Fan, which is a Philadelphia sports talk radio channel, and they were livid. They were so mad, and they were like, "How could you do this? This is supposed to be the process. Like, this is not a process. This is just, selling all your best assets and selling them for pennies on the dollar and blah, 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 blah." And then the GM spoke, and then afterwards they're like, "Oh yeah, it makes sense. Everything's fine. Yada yada yada." And maybe that's getting the explanation and being satisfied with it. But I feel like hockey fans wouldn't if they're mad about their initial reaction tends to be the reaction. So like if we ended up trading, I'm trying to think of equivalent. If we end up trading Jesper Bratt for a second round pick, it's like, well, in real dollars and cents, you traded Jesper Bratt, a 6th round pick, for a 2nd round pick. You're winning, but we wouldn't react that way. We'd be like, "What are you doing? Like, this is a young player who's supposed to be built with us, and you turned him into somebody who's not going to be even in the NHL for 2 to 3 years." And that would probably be the proper reaction too. But that's what the Sixers did, and everybody was like, "This is very, very silly." And the GM spoke, and they didn't feel that way anymore. I don't feel like hockey fans have that kind of mentality.
No, and the other thing too, and we can have a debate about this. Hockey is one of those sports where you cannot rely solely or very heavily on analytics. Other sports, you may be able to get away with it. I'm not sure about the NBA. I know this is a very analytics-driven organization, and I respect that. Don't get me, because I do find that stuff fascinating and interesting. But what I also find fascinating and interesting is when you make decisions against the analytics. And, again, I use this reference all the time. And yeah, maybe it's like one of those things, but back in 1980, if you look on paper, the Soviets and the Team USA, who was supposed to win that game? But nobody ever talked, and we always talked about the upset, a bunch of college kids, but what manipulated Team USA, Mike Eruzione, to win? And what we found out through the movie Miracle, there was a plan.
I hope you found out before the movie, but
I know, but I'm just saying.
I understand
that Herb Brooks. But what I found intriguing about the movie was Herb Brooks had a vision. It didn't happen by accident, and I'm trying to understand, because any kind of successful organization or success in business or success in life, it always starts with a vision. What is the vision of this? And I'm trying to, anytime a press release comes out from the Devils, this is just me. I don't believe in any kind of press release because anybody that believes a press release is a fool. Their own press release. But anytime I read all this stuff, I'm always trying to figure out what's the vision of all this. And I honestly don't think Harrison Blitzer really have a vision where this is all going, other than, hey, we'll suck for, go on the Pittsburgh Penguins plan back in 2003. We'll suck for a while, and we'll get lucky with a couple first overalls like Sidney Crosby and, maybe a higher pick like Malkin. And then we got our 1-2 punch and call it a day and win a Stanley Cup. That's how we do it. And also we'll finance our arena with gambling.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, that again, hasn't worked out very well. I mean, it's probably still working out a little bit, but the COVID thing probably put a little bit of a damper on that. Yeah. And listen, I'm gonna hit back a little bit on the analytics, but I know where you're coming from. So, like, you look at the New York Yankees, right?
Mhm.
The New York Yankees are basically like the rumor, or I don't know how much truth. There's some truth to the statement that Aaron Boone doesn't even manage. That like the number crunchers upstairs manage, right? Like that's like, that's the prevailing thought process, and there's too many on the fly decisions to work like that in hockey. Like you have to make line changes in the middle of the game, in the middle of a shift. You have to make, you have to make gut decisions all the time, and the analytics. Like I'm sure Lindy Ruff knows the analytics. He knows how good Jack Hughes' line is in the defensive zone with such and such amount of time left in this time, and he knows how good Pavel Zacha is taking a center or taking a face-off on the power play with, when there's only 15 seconds left in the power play. Like, these are the types of analytics that they can use on top of, I think analytics in hockey are used more often to gain and lose assets than it is to make day by day. I don't want to say day by day because I do think they use it some for day by day, but like in-game reaction, I don't think they use analytics as much as people think. I think they use analytics for maybe lineups, and I think they definitely use analytics for acquisitions, for drafting, for who they're going to expose in the expansion draft, for things like that. I think that's where analytics plays the biggest role in hockey, and I think it plays an important role because that's how you find, the whole Moneyball thing. Speaking of movies, the whole Moneyball thing you saw was to acquire players that were being undervalued by other organizations. And everybody has analytics now. So you can't really take advantage of it like Billy Beane did in the movie, but you can at least, what you're looking for and what you're looking at when it comes to analytics, when it comes to these players. And I think that's a very important thing in hockey because hockey is such a fast game, it can be deceiving. You could think a player that's fast and scores, or fast and gets a lot of secondary assists, or fights in corners and things like that. You could think that they're really good when they're inconsistent. They're doing that once every 5 shifts. You know what I mean? So I think that's what the analytics bears out, is it takes away those inconsistencies because a lot of that is luck. You know what I mean? Like there's certain players who are like Connor McDavid's always going to score 30 goals, and Sidney Crosby is always going to get 70 points to minimum. But there are players like when I'm looking at the analytics, like, is this Miles Wood year an outlier? It might be because the analytics are still a little on the fence about him. They're better than they've been in years past, but when I look at the whole spectrum of his 5 years, this looks like an outlier. You know what I mean? So if the Devils want to look at their assets and somebody says, well, I like what Miles Wood did this year, I'm going to make him part of I'm pulling this name out of a hat, a Mitch Marner trade. The Devils aren't going to like scoff at that because they know what the numbers say. But if it's somebody like Igor Sharangovich, who the analytics look good on, and he also contributed to the team, and he had counting stats and analytics, they might be like, well, I don't really want to lose that asset. That's the difference, is you're looking at the numbers in those types of ways.
And you make a fair point. At the same time, I think all I'm saying is, growing up, I remember when I was 5 years old, I took an IQ test. They said my IQ was, I forgot what it was. It was actually decent. It was above average. But sometimes the IQ doesn't really measure that person, and there's a thing called EQ, emotional intelligence. And I think there should be some kind of metric potentially, and I don't know if there is, on the human element of some of these players.
Yeah, absolutely.
The
Yankees are failing, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah. So again, it's a healthy balance, just like anything else in life. But And let's go back to the title. Who's available, Nick? These are the kind of little things that, scouting, the GM, the assistant GM, and an organization like the New Jersey Devils see who could they trade, who could they pick up free agency, who should they offer a restricted free agent potentially, what are the consequences. So let's get to it, Nick. Tell me something, because everybody's waiting.
Oh, so the first player that we had to talk about is Matthew Tkachuk.
Tkachuk, okay.
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to say his name wrong. I apologize. I'll try to get better at that. I don't know how, but Matthew Tkachuk. Say it for me once.
Tkachuk.
Okay.
Yep.
Matthew Tkachuk is just perfect. I mean, he scores goals. He's hard-nosed. He's a grinder. He's somebody who...
I loved his dad when he played, just so you know.
Yeah, and Matthew is just built very similarly and can do just about everything. He can kill penalties if you need him to. He's very good on the power play. The only concerning thing about Matthew Tkachuk is his production has dropped pretty considerably. So in his contract year, where he signed this 3-year, $7 million, 3-year, $21 million deal, the year before he had 34 goals. In the first year of that deal, he was on pace for 27, which is fine. There's variance in every year, and those things happen, and a lot of it is luck and who he's surrounded with, and yada yada. So I'm not worried about a 7-goal drop in 1 year. What worries me is that in this past year, he was on a 23-goal pace. That's, to drop from 34 to 23 when you've had a precipitous drop in each year, that's a little worrisome. Now, I've given other players a pass because the pandemic has been how do you even do? You know what I mean? How is that? You talk about emotional intelligence. Let's talk about mental health and how does that impact them and how is that impacting numbers? And the season's weird. The Flame season was a hot mess. And I think it makes sense to try to get that asset. The problem is that his contract is up next year. His qualifying offer is $9 million because that's how he negotiated his contract. So he can just take a qualifying offer 2 years in a row, 2 one-year deals for $9 million, and then walk for nothing. So that's concerning. He has a lot of power. And
oh yeah, I mean, the Tkachuk family,
the Devils aren't going to pay him.
Of power forwards.
Yeah, so the Devils aren't going to pay him $9 million a year in a long-term deal. Would they pay him $7? Are you going to tell your captain Nico Hischier that you just got a guy and you're going to pay him this basically the same as him on a long-term deal? I don't know how that works in that place. Colorado's had to have that conversation with Nathan McKinnon because Mikko Rantanen makes quite a bit more than him now. And they apparently want to keep Gabriel Landeskog, and he's going to make quite a bit more than him now. That's also a team I want them to target. I think Ryan Graves would be a really, really good addition to this team. They're really in a weird spot with the expansion draft. They really have to do the 8 because there's 4 defensemen that they can't just lose. One's Eric Johnson, who's got a no move clause, so they have to protect him. And then they have Cale Makar, Devin Tays, and Gerard, I think, are the three others. So that's 4. They already have to do 8 because they have to protect one, and Gerard, Tays, and Makar would each probably be the best defenseman available of any player in this expansion draft. So they're definitely going to protect those 4. Can you add another one in Graves, who's also quite good? I don't think they can. So either he's going to get taken by Seattle, because again, he'd still be one of the better defensemen, or he's going to get traded. Now, Graves was their top penalty killer And I think they were 8th in the league in penalty kill, and they were even better than that in playoff penalty kill. So he's somebody who's always on the ice, had the most minutes on penalty kill, is somebody who shuts the other team down, and he can play 39 minutes very, very, very well. He's basically like how the Islanders use Andy Green, but a much younger version of that. And I think that the Devils could really, really use that right now.
Yeah, I mean, getting back to Matthew Tkachuk, I mean, Ryan Mann in the Facebook group joined us late, but that's okay. Better late than never. Completely agrees with you, Nick. What the Devils need right now are big guys, grinders that can create some room, hard hitting, also skilled.
Yeah.
And some leadership up front. Again, to extract him from Calgary, I hope they can do it. That's a potential destination only because, hey, they're in different conferences. They don't see each other that often, and they can mutually help each other out, right? So, again, it would be nice to have an American-born player coming back. Missing Paul Mary right now. I don't think Paul Mary's coming back. You kind of have to, rebuild.
His price went too high.
Yeah.
His price went too high this playoffs. He made himself. I think he made himself an extra 2 years in the contract and an extra $1 million per. Like, I think somebody's going to give him a 4x5, and go for him. I'm happy for him.
Oh, absolutely.
And maybe he'll even get more than that. Maybe he'll get 4x6 or 5x6. Somebody's going to pay him well because of how he's shown up for these playoffs. And I just don't think the Devils are willing. Like, the Devils are probably willing to give him, like, if he wants 6, the Devils would give him 2x6. But if another team's offering 4x5, he'd take 4x5 over 2x6. 2 years and $6 million per. He'd take 4 years and $5 million per over the 2x6. Just knowing the situation at hand. So I think, and you got to remember too, this year, and we didn't talk about this a lot, but this year had that weird. Wasn't it like 20% escrow?
Yeah. It was
and I remember
ridiculous.
I remember we talked about that with the Taylor Hall deal. Taylor Hall made $8 million this year, but he had to give like a lot of it back. So he did not make $8 million a year. He, his worth is $8 million a year. So great. But he needs to cash in because he didn't make that this year. He didn't go home with $8 million. He didn't even go home with whatever it is, like $5.2 million after taxes or whatever it is. He's walking home with probably like,
I think Taylor Hall right now, it's not about getting top dollar right now. I think it's about winning, being happy where he's at, and getting
like find a legacy.
Yeah, and getting near top dollar, not being the guy. I mean, sometimes it's better just to be, the second, but not the guy, the face. And I think he'll thrive better. Maybe that was his problem all along. Maybe because I mean, think about it. 2018, that was very unexpected. The team making the playoffs, but we didn't think Taylor Hall would suddenly become the Hart Trophy winner. So maybe he thrives. He thrives when he's under the radar and undetected.
Maybe and he just got engaged, so he's got bigger plans in the works. Sorry, Selena Gomez. He's a guy who just seems like he kind of just wants to do his thing, and I think he could have did that in New Jersey, but we just couldn't get our stuff together. You know what I mean? I think if that 2019 season worked, he was here because we were going to give him $9 million a year, and clearly nobody else is giving him that.
Yeah.
So I think, Yeah, but that's it's revisionist history, and that's all fun and games. I think this offseason is going to be big. There's a lot of other interesting teams. We've been tied to Rasmus Ristolainen, and I've said no, flat out no. He's Damon Severson 2.0. I think I said this on last week's podcast, so we don't have to go back into it. If they throw in Sam Reinhart, I'm listening. Then I'm curious.
Have you been seeing all the Jack Eichel scenarios? Not just Devils. I haven't seen anything about the Devils seriously, but like it's running wild. Larry Brooks is going wild with it.
Yeah, I think that what's going to happen with Jack Eichel is people are going to talk themselves into a frenzy, and he's going to go for more than we think. Because people think that Buffalo is desperate to get rid of him, and I don't think they are. I think they're looking for the right deal, but the Devils aren't going to pay it. They're not going to pay the right deal. They're just not. So that's off the table. I think LA is the team that's going to pay the right deal, and I think it's going to be like Turcotte this year's first and something else. Mm-hmm. And that's going to get them Jack Eichel. Yeah. But there's like people like, I'm refusing to give up. Like the Rangers fans who are like, I'm refusing to give up. They can't have Kakko. They can't have Lafreniere. They can't have Höglander. They can't, or not Höglander. That's the guy in Vancouver. Lundqvist. They can't have. There's another guy. They're like, nope, can't have that guy. Can't have this. Like, can't have Condre Miller. Can't like. They're making basically their top 15 young players and prospects untouchable, and like that's not going to get you Jack Eichel. So you know what I mean? Like, and I know a lot of Kings fans are like, can't give up Byfield, can't give up Turcotte, can't give up Kaliev. It's like, well, Jack Eichel's still one of the top centers in the league, and yeah, he's like purposely like devaluing himself, but I mean, people see what he's doing, and people are eventually going to pay what they're going to pay. I think that this Jack Eichel deal is going to be crazy.
Yeah, and I will say right now, since this extended rebuild is still ongoing, screw it. Just keep doing what you're doing. We're almost to the end here, hopefully. You know, Jack Hughes.
What's the thing?
You know, Jack Hughes, we haven't seen the real Jack Hughes yet. That's the thing, because, you know, his rookie season, okay, you know, he learned a lot. 9.5 months of nothing other than to bulk up. Then you bulk up, then you get hit with COVID, right? And then coming back from it, as now we're understanding from not just hockey players but all athletes, it's not that easy. Honestly, we may not see the full potential of Jack Hughes. Like, we've seen glimpses, but I think it's going to be the second half of next season. We're going to see the real Jack Hughes comes out. Once he gets started, hopefully he gets off to a hot start. But I think going into February of 2022 and March of 2022, we're going to see glimpses of Jack Hughes that we know that he can hold on to that puck. We know he's slippery good. We know he has great vision. But once he's got that chemistry and that consistent support, we're going to see a Jack Hughes put up numbers of maybe high 20 goals and 50 to 60 assists next season. That's what I think, if all goes well. I mean, barring any injuries or unforeseen, non-82 games schedule, whatever. But I think Jack Hughes is going to show us something, and it's almost addition by subtraction by, okay, just stay the course. Don't mess up the chemistry. Sharangovich, he could have a sophomore slump next season.
Yeah.
But he does have a little he does have a little fire in the belly. I mean, I don't know about you, but yeah, I wouldn't recommend it to kids. But hey, given the bird in the tournament, I kind of liked it actually.
Yeah, I mean, it shows a little fire. Like I
Yeah.
said, I was glad that he apologized because it shows,
Oh
an
yeah.
understanding of public relations and all that. But I'm also, I don't mind that he did it in the
Yep.
throes of competition. So,
Hey, we've seen worse. I mean, trust me, we've seen worse. We've seen Mike Milbury take off a guy's shoe and then hit him with his own shoe. I mean, that's a lot worse.
listen,
I know it happened in the '70s as Mike Milbury, but still.
have another donut, Sam. Have another
Yeah.
donut.
Oh yeah.
That's all I
Yeah.
gotta say. But yeah, I think when you look at this roster as a whole, as is right now, because I was talking about this when I wrote the art. There's an article on Kachuk on Pucks and Pitchforks website right now. You're talking about a top six that has Saka and Bratt in between, or on the wings of Heischer, Sharangovich and Kuokkanen on the wings of Hughes. If one of them falls off and has a slump, you got Alexander Holtz in the waiting. You got Dawson Mercer in the waiting. So it's definitely not as dire as it was last year. Not nearly as dire as it was last year because you got a top six that's fine. It's kind of fine.
How about this line? I'm going to throw a line at you. See if they do get Matthew Tkachuk, Heischer, Holtz.
I mean, I think that's definitely fun. That is definitely fun.
Because think of what Tkachuk can do to open up the sniper and the two-way centerman, Nico Heischer.
I think my biggest issue is that you have Bratt in that top six, and he has to work in the top six as currently constructed because he's basically, Zaka's the most veteran of them, but he plays a very specific role, Zaka, and he figured out how to make it turn into points last year. But Bratt has to be the goal scorer, and he wasn't, so he sure had to turn into the goal scorer, which took away a lot of his assist priorities, and it just didn't work. It looked like it could have worked, but there was just something not right there. And I think it had a lot to do with Bratt's finishing ability. And I think if you take him off the pressure of the second line, not saying that he's folding under the pressure, but just saying letting him ramp up the skill on the third line and put a goal scoring threat there, I think would help.
I mean, Scotty alluded to this last season about Sharangovich because he wasn't on the Sharangovich bandwagon or whatever. He admitted he was wrong about that, but he did make a good point that still stands out. I said, I asked Scotty, why not Sharangovich? He said, because we've got too many of them on the team. Does that make Jesper Bratt? Does that make Bratt expendable?
I think everybody's expendable who's not Heischer, Hughes, and Holtz. And when I say expendable, I mean if you're telling me that Matthew Tkachuk is available, I'm not giving you two or three of them. But if you're asking me for a first-round pick, one of those top-flight young players, and then another B-plus prospect, I'm not blinking. You know what I mean? If they said Sharangovich, the Islanders first, and even Nolan Foote, that's a big package to give up. But Matthew Tkachuk is not a player that's available very often.
Yeah.
They'll probably ask for more than that. They'll probably ask for the other first-round pick. I'd still consider it. I mean, Luke Hughes is somebody the more I see written about him, the more I study him myself, the more I like him. And maybe that's just what happens with prospects. Everybody falls in love with them. But the more I study Luke Hughes, the more I study Brant Clark, I've gone down on Brant Clark and what I think of his tape. But I think that's just because there are certain things he really needs to work on, and most specifically skating. He's still going to be a really good player, but Luke Hughes is just, his game is beautiful. You know what I mean? So
yeah, the
losing
more and
the
more
ability to take him
I
would be
mean,
hurtful.
the more and more I think about it, again, I've read the articles and whatnot. I think the Jack Hughes experience overall has been very positive. Of course,
Yeah.
there's been growing pains, but I think honestly, I could foresee Tom Fitzgerald making a move on draft day to move up to secure
You do?
that. I do.
I just think he's going to be there.
Do you think
I think it's going to go. So here's the thing. It's going to be, I think it's almost deadlocked Power Beniers. 1-2. Everybody's telling me Power at number 1, but I think Beniers just makes a little more sense, but I could be wrong. It's very possible I could be wrong. Because it just seems like everybody's saying Power.
Seattle's the wild card here because there is no needs because it's at a clean slate. That makes things difficult, and
yeah. We got to see what happens. Wait, I always get the dates mixed up. Is the expansion draft first?
Yes, I believe so.
The expansion draft is first. So they'll have an idea of what they need, and we'll be able to kind of see what they're going to go after based on who they take in the expansion draft. That's not going to be the be-all, end-all. They're still going to need high-quality young players at each position. So, but it'll at least know, if they have a bunch of older defensemen, maybe that, it looks like, oh, well, maybe they'll take a defenseman, but that's neither here nor there. Just my last point here is that I think that the Devils are primed to make a move of massive proportions. I don't think they'll go after Eichel just because it just doesn't make sense right now.
Yeah.
But I think they're going to go after a monster winger between the ages of 22 and 25, like monster, like Matthew Tkachuk and higher. Patrick Laine's on the table. Somebody like that. Somebody like a monster. And Laine has his issues. I still think that he'd fit really well on certain lines in this team. But neither here nor there. I think the Devils are going to go hunting this offseason. And I think the trades could go down pretty quickly just because of the expansion draft, just because of what people are doing. My dream of the Alexander Ovechkin signing seems to be over because he came out during exit interviews. I just saw this the other day. I know it happened a couple weeks ago, but I missed it. My dream of Alex Ovechkin signing with the Devils seems to be over because he said he wants to retire with the Capitals. He thinks something's going to get done, blah, 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 blah. So, oh, well, it was fun while it lasted. I knew it wasn't going to happen, but it was a fun thing to talk about.
Yeah.
No, I think the Devils... I mean, let's say the Kraken take PK Subban, or even Will Butcher. If they take somebody like that, if they take Will Butcher, that adds another $3 million or 3.3 and change to the salary cap space that they have to fill. And they have to fill $20 million just to get to the floor. And the biggest contract they have to give out this year is to Sharangovich. I've seen some predictions that are crazy, and those crazy predictions are $4 million. So let's say they re-sign everybody to the crazy predictions that are out there. It's still only $10 million, $11 million. Bastion just re-signed for, I think, $875,000. Mm-hmm. I feel like McLeod is going to get somewhere in the $1.1 million range, and that's the biggest contracts outside of Sharangovich that you'd resign. So I just see the Devils just having a minimum of $10 million just to get to the cap floor. So they have to spend money. They're going to have to bring people in. Maybe they'll give 1-year contracts like the Wayne Simmons contract, or maybe they give 1-year contracts to somebody who's like a high price free agent, like a Taylor Hall, who's looking to build their value in between some skilled centers. I hope they don't do that. That's not the smart way to go about this. If they go to Dougie Hamilton and be like, we'll give you $10 million to play for us for 1 year. Like, that's not the smartest way. You know what I mean? That's not a smart way to go about it.
Yeah.
I think they have to secure the future. And I think that this is the time to do it.
And, if you look across the river, right now it doesn't look good for the Islanders as we speak, as I'm watching the game.
What's the score?
It's 1-0. Currently, it's 1-0 Tampa in the second period, but they're going to be in some cap hell.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that's
Lou has his ways, though.
Oh yeah, I mean, he'll bury you if he needs to. You don't come back.
Where did Anders Lee go? It's like, where'd he go? He's just missing.
Yeah.
Okay. Long-term injured reserve.
And never question the boss.
But that's all I got. Pucksandpitchforks.com. We're going to have, lots of stuff. Like I said, there's going to be a ton of stuff on there right now that you can just go through. There's history stuff. There's, off-season stuff. Really go read that I wrote it, so it's always weird to do that, but it's a nice look at what he did with the Devils beyond the trade. Seattle Kraken, Vinny Parisi had a nice little Seattle Kraken piece the other day.
Yes, he did.
That goes over some of the players that could be gone. I wrote the Kachuk piece is up from today, so go check that out. Pucksandpitchforks.com. We're going to have stuff all week.
Yes, and I just want to say hello to Matt Junio, Mike Rossi, everybody in the Facebook Live. Hey, there is no off season with the State of the Fan address, Pucks and Pitchforks blog.
No vacations.
And yeah, while you're on vacation. Yeah, that's not how we roll. But we'll have more to come. Till next time, let's go Devils.